Om Hari Om. Let us start. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhi Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bhadram Karnebhi Shrunuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashye Makshabhiryajatraha Sthirairangai Stuštuvagam Sastanubhihi Vyashema Devahitam Yadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vriddhashravaha Swasti na Pusha Visvavedaha Swasti nastarksho Arishtanemihi Swasti no Brihaspati'r dadhatu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So we recapitulate from the last class before we begin today's new session. So as human beings, we saw there are multiple factors which are beyond our control and which makes us helpless in our pursuit of happiness and success. Some factors are external to us. They were discussed separately. Then there are some factors which are internal to us. Again, those which are internal to us can again be divided into something which is common to the entire human race and something which can be attributed to an individual. So those factors which are common to the entire human race, we discussed most of them. So I'll recall them, like the head brain versus the gut brain. We saw as if an independent brain is working within us, and which we gave the name as the elephant and the rider. So the rider is the rational self, the head brain, and the elephant is the emotional or the instinctual self, which has many facets. One of them works through the gut brain. Then we saw the role of the frontal cortex. We have the hind brain, the midbrain, and the frontal brain. The midbrain and the hind brain, they developed much earlier than the frontal brain. And they constitute the instinctual self within us. Instinctual or the emotional self. Then we also saw how decision-making is a separate center in our head and reasoning is a separate center. And many a times we find decisions are made and the reasoning comes later, instead of the opposite happening, that decisions are arrived after reasoning. No, it is not like that. Many times we are not even aware of it, and we make the decisions, and then we supply the logic. And that phenomena is also called what we saw as confabulation. Supplying logic, defending a decision, which is basically an emotional decision, and supplying a logic to it. Then we also saw the subtle effects of unconscious thinking. When a word is flashed for a millisecond or less than 100th of a second, the meaning of that word affects our thinking when it is made available to the right brain. So the subtle effects of the unconscious thinking. So these things are common to the entire human race. Then we have certain individual genetic factors. And we discussed last time the famous marshmallow experiment, in which the delayed gratification, the children who could delay their urge for gratification, they grew much more successful compared to the remaining kids of the same group. So that is the capacity to resist or delay the gratification was available to these kids, possibly genetically, or due to some reason right from the birth. And that helped them in achieving success in their later academic life. Then we also saw the famous case of identical twins, the two girls who were brought up together, brought up separately. They were identical twins. They got separated and they were brought up separately, but they exhibited many similar traits. Not only many similar traits, even certain events in their life happened almost identically, which cannot be explained through a normal logic of genes only. And we discussed that the identical twins must have been born with very little time apart, and that's how their horoscopes, their charts, the birth natal charts must have been very, very close. And that's how the events in their lives were almost identical. And we also discussed last time that I can prove how astrology is a science because there is a predictability. And I gave the example that you give me the birth details of two different people of very different personality traits. Don't tell me which one is whose, and give me the personality traits, and I will tell you which personality trait belongs to which person. So if I can make that connection, and if there is a predictability, so any knowledge, body of knowledge which has a predictability is a science. Even we have this meteorological sciences which predicts the weather. They make so many mistakes, and yet we consider it as science. Why? Because in spite of making mistakes, they are doing a fairly good job. The probability of their prediction going right is more than their prediction going wrong. And that's why it's a science. Okay, then we discussed the adaptation principle, that each individual genetically has a certain level of being happy or cheerfulness. So no matter what happens in his or her life, whether a very desirable event happens or something sad happens, in due course, the effect of both the both the effect of both the types of events, either a sad event or a happy event, it fades away with the time, and the person comes to what we call as a baseline level of cheerfulness, or by himself or herself. So that's called adaptation principle, and that is determined by the genes which the person carries. So that's how we saw the factors which are applicable to the entire human race, and then the factors which are dependent on the individual because they are genetic factors. So this is the story of the rider and the elephant. The rider is me and the elephant is me. And if I look carefully, I find the elephant is more powerful than the rider. And if the elephant has to get aligned to the rider, has to get trained and behave as per the rider, it requires a lot of training. And how to train that elephant? Elephant means the emotional self, the instinctual self within me. And the rider means the rational self within me. So how the emotional or the instinctual self can be brought under the control of the rational self? So there are various methods, and we choose now the methods which have been discussed in lot of detail, in a very holistic manner in the Bhagavad Gita. And that's how we introduce this great epic called the Bhagavad Gita today. The Bhagavad Gita is a portion of the great epic Mahabharata. Mahabharata is a poem with almost more than 100,000 of verses, and it was authored by Krishna Dvaipayana, who is also called Vedavyasa. So it's an authored work, it's a poem, and it depicts the story of the Kauravas and the Pandavas right from even before their birth, a few generations before their birth, till the end of the Mahabharata war. People call it a mythical scripture. When they call it mythical, they consider it as a myth. And myth means just a dream story without reality. But the fact is, it is quite real. There are enough archaeological evidences and other supportive evidences available throughout India, not just in few places like Kurukshetra or Dwarika or some other places. Throughout India, there are enough number of evidences. And when we collate them together, we find that they weave the story which is very close to what the Mahabharata says. Mahabharata being a poem, because it's a poem, there is a poetic license with the poet. For example, many of you might have heard or watched the movie, heard about or watched the movie The Titanic, right? Now, the movie Titanic talks about the Titanic, the ship which sank in 1911 or something, I don't remember. And there is a real story. But since it's a movie, there is a license given to the director and the actors to modify it suitably to make it more interesting. So the Titanic movie actually doesn't totally talk about the real Titanic, yet it is not very far away from the real story of Titanic. Correct? Similarly, the Mahabharata epic, the poem, may not be exactly depicting what really happened in the history, but still it is very close to what must have happened in the history. So that's the fact. Even some of the planetary combinations which are described in the poem, the Mahabharata poem, it gives us a date which is almost more than 5,000 years back, because a certain planetary combination happens every few thousand years. It keeps repeating. So that combination which is described there was available almost 5,000 years back. So there are many evidences, right from the radio, this carbon dating, up to this planetary combinations and other archaeological evidences, which does talk about the Mahabharata, the Kauravas and the Pandavas and the story around it. Okay. Now, a portion of the Mahabharata is called the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita is part of the Bhishma Parva section of the Mahabharata. The portion which describes a little bit of the war and mostly the dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna just before the war. That portion is called the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna and Krishna must have talked on different occasions, and there are dialogues available in the Mahabharata, but those portions are not called the Bhagavad Gita because they talk about different things in different contexts. But the Bhagavad Gita is talked in a very special context, and the context is first the Arjuna's dilemma, whether he should be fighting or he should not be fighting, and second, why he is full of sorrow at this moment and how he can come out of this sorrow. So it addresses these two problems concerned with Arjuna at that moment. And we find that those two problems of Arjuna are so much relevant in each one of us, with the life of each one of us, even today, and as long as the humanity remains. Those are the common problems. The first problem is what I should be doing in a given situation. I think it should be done this way. Okay, because that's my gut feeling. Remember the gut feeling. Then that gut feeling comes and I make decisions, and then I supply logic to it, confabulation. Arjuna did the same thing. We will see how the Arjuna confabulated a series of logic and arguments behind his decisions, and how it was a clear case of confabulation. Then it also talks about how helpless the whole Bhagavad Gita, it talks about the helplessness of the human being and the aspiration of the human being. So human being wants to be happy, but is helplessly dragged towards unhappiness. And why it happens and how it can be solved, how it can be, this problem can be solved. So all this we will see in the Bhagavad Gita. Before we get into the shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita, just the two shlokas we will remember. The first one is Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre Samaveta Yuyutsavaha Mamakah Pandavas Chaiva Kimakurvata Sanjaya. So this is a question from Dhritarashtra to his charioteer Sanjaya, that in the war of Kurukshetra, in the place Kurukshetra, which was a Dharma Kshetra. Dharma Kshetra means where people used to perform actions of charity and other spiritual disciplines, even before the war. So it's a famous place, Kurukshetra, and it does exist very close to my place in Chandigarh. It's, I think, almost near about 100 kilometers, 80 kilometers, 50 miles. So Kurukshetra did exist, and the war did happen in this Kurukshetra. So what is happening in that battlefield, please let me know. This is what Dhritarashtra asks his charioteer Sanjaya. We'll go into this story a little bit more in detail later. So the first word is Dharma, Dharma Kshetre. And the last word of the Bhagavad Gita is Dhruva Nitir Matir Mama, Mama. So the entire Bhagavad Gita is encapsulated between the two letters Dhar and Ma. So it is talking about predominantly Dharma. What is Dharma? Dharma is not religion here. Religion is a very small subset of Dharma. Certain misconceptions, certain usage of words, we have to be careful. For example, if I ask you, what is the English translation of Rama or Mohan or Krishna? Can you ever translate these words? Impossible. There are no translations. There can be meanings in English, but no translations. So you can't have even a translation of roti. Okay, roti is not bread, by the way. Bread is bread and roti is roti. Can you translate dosa? Some call it pancake. Pancake is different. Dosa is different. So certain words cannot be translated. Similarly, dharma cannot be translated as religion. That's silly. In fact, another thing I tell you, similarly, there is no word in Sanskrit for divorce. Do you know that? Talaq or divorce Talaq is a Urdu word, divorce is an English word, and there is no Sanskrit word for it. You cannot translate it into Sanskrit. Why? Because that concept didn't exist. So the word didn't exist. So there is no translation available. Similarly, there is no translation available for the word dharma because that concept didn't exist. But very loosely people translate dharma as religion, and then religion is defined whatever the way they want to define. And then there is a lot of confusion. Okay. So certain words, if they are left to themselves and not translated, they serve better purpose than having been translated and then misused or abused. So dharma also we will see what dharma means. Definitely not religion. Okay. In fact, the concept of religion was unknown to us, unknown to this culture. It was imposed upon us, and therefore we had to react to it. And we also had something called religion. And then the word Hinduism, etc. came. Anyway, so the entire Bhagavad Gita talks about dharma. And the context you have to see. Arjuna decided to have Krishna as his charioteer. And Krishna was driving his chariot. Arjuna ordered Krishna before the war that you take my chariot between the two armies, somewhere in the middle, and let me see. I have to fight with which all people in front of me. So he was ready for the war. He was enthusiastic, excited, and very much ready for the war. And when Krishna took the chariot in the middle of the battlefield between the two armies who were there to fight, and Arjuna saw the entire opposite party army, the Kauravas army, standing in front of him. And then he also saw his beloved teacher, Dronacharya, his beloved great-grandfather, Bhishma, and Kripacharya. And suddenly he was filled with sorrow. Not only sorrow, he started questioning himself. Why should I be fighting with my beloved people, the people whom I respect? Why should I be fighting? And when that thing happened, he lost his cool. He became filled with sorrow, and he even asked Krishna whether it is proper for him to fight or not, and why he should be fighting. In fact, he started giving all kinds of reasons. And if you look at the reasons, you will definitely agree with Arjuna and say, Krishna doesn't have any argument now, and Arjuna should not be fighting. He said that for the sake of kingdom, why should I be killing so many people, including those who were always my well-wishers, like Kripacharya, Dronacharya, etc. And even if I gain the kingdom with all this bloodshed, I will never be able to enjoy that kingdom. So a kingdom which is filled with, or which has the basis of bloodshed, will never give me peace of mind, will never give me joy. So why should I be fighting? It will create a vacuum in the society because all the able-bodied male members of the society will get killed in this war, and only widows and semi-orphan children will be there. Fatherless children will be there. So there is no point fighting the war, and I'm not interested in any kingdom or any victory or glory after the fight. So why should I fight? I should go back. In fact, killing people is for the sake of kingdom is the worst kind of choice I'll be making in life, and I don't want to make it. So when you hear this, you say, wow, Arjuna realized even if it was late, no, doesn't matter. And you will find Krishna kept on saying, you get up and fight, you get up and fight, you get up and fight. So as if Krishna was instigating Arjuna to fight, even though Arjuna was not ready to fight. So who is the culprit? Definitely Krishna. And this this imagery or this image resides in our mind, and that's why we find in India many people in many homes they say we don't keep Mahabharata epic at home because it signifies fighting among family members. So we keep only Ramayana. But Ramayana also had fights. Okay. And Rama was sent to exile for no reason. That is also part of Ramayana. So all those are silly arguments. Now, to understand whether Arjuna was right or Krishna was right, we have to understand the background behind the war. And that's why the story of Mahabharata becomes important. If one doesn't know the story of Mahabharata and straight away goes into the Bhagavad Gita, and especially the first chapter and portions of the second chapter, one will get disheartened. One will feel that I think Krishna is wrong and I need not proceed further. The background is this war happened after a long wait and a series of events which showed tolerance on the side of the Pandavas. Right from their childhood, the Kauravas kept on planning how to kill the Pandavas. Right from the childhood. The poisoning of Bhishma, then the burning of the Lakshagraha. They escaped that fire and all were saved. And then later on, what happened with Draupadi, the disrobing of Draupadi in front of the whole court of Dhritarashtra, right in the court, in front of the king and all the important members of the courtiers of the king. Draupadi was disrobed. Okay, it's a different story that she was saved by Krishna and all due to some magic and all. But attempt was made to outrage her modesty, and that was not acceptable. If a princess can be disrobed in the court in front of the king, then what can you expect of any other lady in the kingdom? Nobody can save any lady. So those were the unpardonable crimes that happened before this war. Another thing one has to understand, when Draupadi was being disrobed, this Bhishma, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, all of them were present in the court and they were watching and they didn't protest. Vidura, who was the minister of Dhritarashtra, he only protested, and when his voice was not heard, he walked out of the court. But these three stalwarts who were capable of stopping that crime, they kept quiet. And as per the rule of that time, and even now, a person who is capable of stopping the crime doesn't stop it and witnesses it is also a partner in the crime. I'll repeat my sentence. A person who is capable of stopping a crime, witnesses the crime but doesn't try to stop it, is also considered a participant in the crime. That was the rule of those times, and partly it is applicable even now. So in that sense, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, and Bhishma, they were equal participant in the disrobing of Draupadi, and they deserved capital punishment. Okay, so the war was not for the kingdom. Had the war been for the kingdom, Krishna wouldn't have gone with a peace treaty saying that, okay, give me 5 villages or a village with 5 houses and we will not have the war. So it was not for the kingdom. So they were given that offer. Kauravas were given the offer that, okay, you give a village with 5 houses and that's all. No more claims from the side of the Pandavas. But when the Kauravas said that we won't give even an inch of the land without a fight, then they said, okay, then now we will fight till the end. No, nothing like fighting in between up to a point. No. So the fight was not for the kingdom, and fight was with the people who were on the side of adharma. Adharma means something wrong, something which is not proper, unsustainable. So the fight was between dharma and adharma, and it was not between the relatives. They happened to be relatives, that was just by chance, but it was between right and wrong. And not for the kingdom, but for establishing the rule of the right. Because if the righteous people don't take charge of the rule of a kingdom, then the kingdom goes in the hands of unrighteous people. And you know what happens. That's how we have ISIS, Taliban, and whatnot. Even some people, they try to glorify King Ashoka. Ashoka disbanded his army after the famous Kalinga war because he was full of remorse because of the death of so many people at that time. And we say that, oh, what a great king he was and whatnot. But because he disbanded the army, in a generation or two, the entire kingdom got divided into princely states because each local chieftain or a powerful army officer became a king of a small region because there was no central power to control them. And from then onwards, the India was mostly divided, although there was a Gupta period and some other periods when they tried to unify the kingdom. But a broken kingdom with internal fights makes the entire country weak, and it it uh, it it makes it liable for attacks from outside. It attracts invaders because they are weak. So invaders will come and finish off the country. So a strong central rule with strong ruler is very, very important. A strong military under a command of a single ruler, a large military under the command of single ruler is so, so important for the righteous rule to continue. So that was the purpose of Mahabharata. Even all the Ashwamedha Yajna and all whatever are mentioned in the Vedas, the philosophy behind it is a righteous ruler and a strong ruler should take initiative to expand the kingdom. Why? So that more and more people come under his umbrella and get benefited. And if that doesn't happen, then there will be small rulers fighting with each other, and the general population is at a disadvantage. They get exploited. So this is the context of the Mahabharata war. So the war between the Kauravas and Pandavas was not a personal enmity. It was between right and wrong. It was not a war between Arjuna and his beloved people, but it was a war between those on the side of the right, those who were the victims, those who took side of the right, and a war between, and the other side was those who were the perpetrator of the crime, and continuously they had been perpetrating the crime, and they wanted to fight it out. So it was war between these two parties. When we understand that context, then we understand why Krishna asked again and again, asking Arjuna, you get up and fight, you get up and fight, you get up and fight. Almost at 9 or 10 places, he repeated those words and asked Arjuna to fight, even though Arjuna was not willing to fight. So when this context is clear, then the words of Lord Krishna becomes meaningful. Otherwise, people keep arguing, and then just in a limited context, they take the words and they find that, oh, Krishna instigated the war and that's not proper. He should have stopped it and all. He did everything to stop the war. That's why he himself went as a envoy, as a for the peace treaty, representing the Pandavas. And mind it, there were no mobile phones during those times. So he didn't call up Yudhishthira, look, they are not giving any land or any kingdom to us. Shall I ask? Okay, you give us 5 villages. So there was that negotiator didn't have the contact with the person whom he was representing. He did it on his own. And when that failed, it didn't work. Then he said, okay, don't think that we are weak and we will just move away. We will fight it out and we will win. And of course, they won. So this is the context of the Bhagavad Gita. The dilemma of Arjuna, whether to fight or not to fight, due to pressures, the social pressures, the emotional pressures. So emotionally, He took an emotional decision of not fighting, and he confabulated and gave logic that it is not proper because of the bloodshed and this and that. So many things he kept on saying. So we see a classic case of confabulation there in case of Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna didn't relent. Of course, he didn't give the whole logic behind it, but he kept on telling him, no, you must fight. In fact, he gave his own logic. He said, who will die? Tell me, why are you afraid of bloodshed? So there's no problem. Nobody is going to die because the person, there's no real death. It's a change of body, etc., etc. He kept on giving the logic. And then the other thing we find in the Bhagavad Gita, it does talk about the helplessness, the human helplessness, and how to train the elephant according to the rider. First, the rider has to be a refined person. And once the rider's thinking is clear, how to align the elephant according to the rider. We will continue next time. So Bhagavad Gita is called both the Yoga Shastra and the Moksha Shastra. Moksha Shastra part we will leave it for some other time. Yoga Shastra means a scripture which gives methods of aligning the emotional or the instinctual self with the rational self, with what is right, what is good for the person. Instinctually, emotionally, we are inclined towards a particular path of living. But rationally, as per dharma, something else must be better. So there is a conflict between Shreyas and Preyas. Preyas means what I desire to do. Okay, that means the instinctual self, where the instinctual self or the emotional self is prominent. Shreyas is what is good for me. So Preyas means what appears good to me, and Shreyas means what is good for me. So what is good for me is decided by the rational self, the self which has the clarity of dharma. And we find there is a constant conflict between this Shreyas and Preyas, and how to align it. So there is a whole set of methods, methodology, and a thinking involved, and it covers the whole thing. And by the way, we also discussed last time, if you remember, that decisions take place almost 7 to 10 seconds before we even come to know about it. So if decision within me happens and I come to know about it later, then am I the author of those decisions? Even that thing is discussed in the Bhagavad Gita very, very clearly. And I'm so much amazed that how that thing thousands of years back, which was discussed, is being rediscovered with different instruments by our scientists. It's really amazing. So we will continue with it, little bit more of introduction before we get into some portions of the Bhagavad Gita, which is directly relevant to us. Okay, especially the Yoga Shastra first, and later on we will even touch upon the Moksha Shastra. Okay, Moksha Shastra I didn't even define. I defined only the Yoga Shastra, and Yoga Shastra is that scripture which tries to align the rider with the elephant. in our allegory. So with this, I stop here with a prayer, and then we will be open for question and answers. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. So if you have any questions, anyone can ask now or even through WhatsApp. And we will come back to you about the next Sunday's schedule because of the change of the daylight saving time, whatever the timings are changing. So we'll get back to you very soon. Okay, thank you.
But we have not received any objections so far yet.
Okay, if we have not received any objections, then India time, okay, means what I'm saying now, only there may be a difference of 5 minutes to 10 minutes, okay, which we will send through writing, okay. But in principle and verbally, I am communicating that 8:30 p.m. India time, IST.
That's okay.
We will be having our class. And if my 5 minutes change I have to make, that I will mention it, because I have to check that that recording processing and all, whatever is happening, all those things I have discussed with Rajesh ji. So once that is finalized, so it will be either 8:25 or 8:30. That only that much difference might be there, which will be communicated to the people, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Hari Om. Thank you.